And I mean, we're talking about a skyscraper that
Right.
is
Yeah.
under the water. If I was a senior in 2001, I was a sophomore, but if I was a senior in 2001, I would have joined them. I would have joined the army right then and gone overseas to kill people in the Middle East. The military is a breeding ground for arrested development.
Welcome to How I Embraced the Suck, a podcast where you get to hear from veterans what life in the military is really like. I am your host, Walt, and before we start, you should know that I do not censor the show in any way. You have been warned. All right, well, here we are. There are some people that say podcasting is gay. So, why not have a guest from the gayest service in the military? Mitch used to be a submariner. Mitch, what's up?
Hey, how's it going, Walt? Thanks for having me.
Not bad. Good. Yeah, glad you could be on. So, what's give us kind of an overview of your time in the Navy.
Yeah, so I was in the Navy from middle of 2007 until 2015, the end of 2015. So I did about 8.5 years of time in the Navy, and I was on submarines. I was an instructor. I was in the nuclear power program and was a nuclear machinist mate. So it's a fancy plumber.
Right.
I guess.
Right.
I moved water around from tanks. I did some maintenance on various machinery components, and did a tour underway on a submarine, ballistics missile sub out in the Pacific Ocean. I didn't tour around the world. I didn't accelerate my life like all those commercials from back in my heyday. No, I rode on a submarine and slept in a 9-man bunk room in between some missile tubes. And I don't know, I did some other cool stuff. The military life, at least my military life, was filled with just kind of a bunch of different roles. Mm-hmm. It's not always like, before I was in the Navy, I laid wood floors, and every job we went to, we laid wood floors, and that was what we did,
Right.
Or we refinished wood floors, and that was just kind of, but, my jobs in the Navy swapped around kind of based on the needs of the command or whatever, and whatever skill sets I had. So I did a bunch of different stuff.
Sure.
Yeah.
Nice. So, so you were based out of the Bangor base then?
Yeah, that was kind of like my final stop. I went to, Navy boot camps in Great Lakes, Illinois. So, I was in the Chicago area, and lucky for me, I was there in the summer. I've heard guys talk about going through boot camp during a Chicago winter, and there's nothing fun about it.
Yeah.
So I'm glad I got to avoid that. But after there, I went to down to nuclear power school down in Charleston, South Carolina, and I was down there for going to power school. There's two different schools you go to. You go to A school and kind of learn the basics, and then you go to nuclear power school, and that's where you learn how to do all your calculate startup rates and do all sorts of nuclear power type stuff. And like I say, I was down there for about little under 2 years, and then went up to upstate New York, and to the other phase of kind of the final phase of training for the nuclear power program. It's called the prototype phase, where you go and you operate a real live nuclear reactor under the supervision of people. After that, I got hired on to train. So I went through the program, and then I applied to stay on as what they call a staff pickup. So I stayed right after I graduated and went through an instructor training pipeline and learned how to be an instructor at that very same prototype. So I did that for another 2 years, and then finally got stationed on a submarine out here in Bangor. And then went to Bremerton to the shipyard, did some stuff down there, and then I got out at the Trident Training Facility back up in Bangor. It's just a big schoolhouse, and I actually worked as a resource librarian there, updating like hundreds of technical manuals with, thousands and thousands of pages of documents and all that stuff. Not really very glamorous, but it had to be done,
Yeah. Yeah. I forgot what I was going to say. So yes. Oh, that's what I was going to say. So when you graduated from that school and then took training to be back as an instructor for the same school, was that the normal path for an instructor, or was it more common to have been deployed on a sub and then come back?
Yeah, that's a great question. It was really more common, and we had both submariners and surface folks who were coming back. We called them sea returnees. So the sea returnees make up the experienced portion of the kind of the training there, and then folks like me, staff pickups. We kind of supplement all of these more experienced sea returnees, because some of them didn't train on our particular prototype. There's a few different prototypes around, so they may not have actually gone through training on that particular prototype. So kind of by default, those of us that go through and are trained up, we're the system experts, because it's the only plant we've ever known to operate and all that stuff. So it really wasn't the typical path, but while I was in that final phase as a trainee at Prototype, there was the Department of Energy, I believe, shut us down, or actually not the Department of Energy, but nuclear training got shut down completely for, I don't know, 9-10 months. And this is like think of it like a people factory, right? There's people that go out to the fleet, they serve their time, and they get out, they're under contract, right? They can't, people aren't really forced to stay too often, especially in like the Navy. Once their contract's complete. So you have all these folks that are kind of running out of time, and we don't have this influx of new people to kind of take the place. So it was a pretty big deal. And so during that training hold, my path was, we were able to go through, and a lot of it's, a lot of what we learn is theory and practices and procedures, and you have to memorize the procedure, and you have to know how kind of each component in the plant is affected by a specific operation. And it's pretty detailed, and there's really 3 sides to the show. You have the mechanic side, you have the mechanic side, which is all of our machinery. You got an electrical side, which is, the wires and all that stuff, and power. And then you have our reactor side, and those folks are called electronics technicians, and they operate the actual nuclear reactor. So while we were in this hold going through training, we weren't allowed to progress through the training path, normally, where we would get certified by displaying knowledge to our instructors and all of this stuff. It was all just kind of practice. We would go and we would demonstrate our knowledge to our instructors, but we couldn't be evaluated for it. We couldn't be officially graded for it. So what they allowed us to do is go in and talk with these instructors. And I had 2 friends. One of them was a machinist mate like me, and the other guy was an electrician. And us 3 would go in front of instructors and get, kind of try to display our knowledge.
Okay.
Well, I went along with these other two dudes because they actually had the knowledge and I had to shoot the shit. And I would talk to the instructor about fishing or hunting or whatever was cool. And these other guys would display all of the knowledge. So I kind of got in with, with some of the sea returning instructors, and they're like, it's
Mitch is all right.
right. He's all right.
Yeah.
We want to work there. And if you kind of got that pull, it's like any other job. If if you know people who work there,
Right.
you're more likely to be able to work there. So, I made friends with a lot of the instructors, the sea returning instructors and stuff. And it definitely was not because I was that I was able to display all of the appropriate knowledge. It was more that I could shoot the shit. So that's kind of how I became an instructor.
Yeah. So you kind of skated through on your friends' knowledge, and they benefited from your camaraderie in the overall testing environment.
Man, you got it. You got it. But and I mean, I don't want to shortchange myself because while I did do that and I did kind of skate through,
Sure.
once I was in, I earned a couple of awards early on in my career that people don't usually earn until much later in their career. And, I worked really hard and it didn't matter. It ended up not mattering that, my book knowledge and my ability to kind of repeat these memorized procedures.
Sure.
That wasn't weighted as heavily as my work ethic and my ability to kind of do the job the appropriate way and consistently and be reliable and kind of all of these other things that I've carried with me through life. And that I have learned from all of my mentors.
Sure. Okay. So getting out as a Navy, getting out of the nuclear portion, that gave you a bump in rank, correct?
Yeah.
Having taken that?
Yeah, so I was kind of fast-tracked through rank for a number of reasons. When I had some college when I joined, so I was able to get a little bit of a bonus when I signed up for the Navy from my college, but also a guaranteed rank. So most people, when they join the military, you come in as an E1. It's a recruit in basically all of our branches. You go to boot camp as an E1, and you get paid. I mean, it's peanuts, man. You get paid maybe $900 a month. I don't know, as an E1. It's not very much. But when I left boot camp, I had earned E3 from having this college experience, basically. So I went to training as an E3, and then part of the incentive of finishing this school down in Charleston is that they let you put on E4, which is third class petty officer. So once I was done with this first part of training, I was an E4, and then I finished up my second part of training. And a requirement of becoming a staff instructor is that you have to re-enlist. So when you re-enlist, they generally make you an E5 for this staff instructor position, and as your first re-enlistment. So at about 2.5 years in, I re-enlisted and put on E5, and then became a staff instructor. And then, worked my ass off. I really did work my ass off there as an instructor, as an E5, and earned those 2 awards. And then I took my E6 ratings exam. That's how we advance rank in the military. Is you have a ratings exam, and or at least in the Navy, I don't know how they do it in the other branches. I think it's like a fist fight or knife fight or rock tossing event or something. I have no idea. But we had to take a test, man, I went in and I took that E6 exam. I was probably one of the most hungover I've ever been in my life. It was awful. It was awful. Just an awful, awful thing. But I ended up advancing off of that exam, and it was tough because I took that exam, and then about a month later, I transferred out to Washington to my first seagoing command. And about 2 months after I was at this seagoing command, I put on E6. So I earned my E6 rank. Well, the problem with that is I didn't have a warfare pin. And when you go to the fleet, one of the first things that you need to do is get qualified your warfare pin. And there's your surface warfare pin or there's your submarine warfare pin. And it's how we earn our SS submarine service designation.
Okay.
Well, if you're an E6 and you're on a submarine and you don't have that warfare pin, you're like basically lower than the lowest guy
Right.
with the submarine pin.
Right.
So it was not a very comfortable entry to to my submarine as this we call it an unqualified E6. So it was a little rocky there in the beginning, but you know what? At the end of the day, I'm taking home an E6 paycheck, and those E3s are still eating Cheerios in the barracks. So whatever, buddy.
So what's the process to get the warfare Is it just tests or classes or
Yeah, that's another good question. So to get your warfare qualification, you basically have to demonstrate to a panel of senior qualified individuals, typically an officer, and a senior enlisted member, and a kind of senior E6 member sits on this panel for qualification. Prior to standing your qualification board in front of these three people, we go through this qual card, and it's this book that we're given right when we show up to the submarine, and essentially it's a detailed outline of every system and procedure on board that submarine. So at the end of it, your board demonstrates to this panel of senior qualified individuals that you're an asset to the submarine, that when a casualty happens, you're not going to be the reason that submarine is never recovered, right? You have knowledge of how to operate all the emergency systems, and you can save yourself and other people should, some sort of emergency arise.
Sure.
It's firefighting, it's casualty response. It's knowing what the parts of the boat do. And I mean, we're talking about a skyscraper that is under the water. It is one of the most phenomenal pieces of engineering equipment I think that's ever been designed. It's unbelievable how enormous and intricate this machine is that we all live on and work on and all that stuff. I mean, aside from all of these other opinions for its purpose that I have, I could still, and anyone should still be able to appreciate the greatness. It's marvel. It is a wonder.
Yeah.
And when you get that submarine qualification pin, you're demonstrating to anyone who looks at you, hey, I've been through a submarine. I know how it works. I know how we breathe. I know how we make water. I know what happens to our shit. I know what happens when we go up or go down. I know how we go up, how we go down, how we move forward, how we move backward. All of these sorts of things I know and can,
and I can be relied on to save you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's kind of what all that means. But I got jaded at that process. I was bitter. I had gone out to sea and we were in the shipyard doing some pretty complex refueling of our reactor. And anything that's done to the reactor directly involves every nuclear qualified individual. So seagoing operations was not important for us at that time. However, for some people, that submarine qualification becomes the most important thing. And that ended up kind of being just a real challenging part of my experience in the military is like, my skill set is best used doing maintenance and making, these complex work packages and these engineering tasks that I have been trained to do, and not so much this, performative like exercise to do something that, is not going to be valuable to anyone in the near future.
Right.
So I shuffled my feet and I had a bad attitude about it. And in the end, I realized, like, God, I should have just got it done right away and, put my nose to the grindstone and really gone through my qual card and not shuffled it and, hit it and kind of like, I was nervous to talk to people, to be honest with you, because I was an E6 and,
Right.
I didn't want to go through conflict with every person I encountered at the command. And I really felt like a lot of times that was what I ran up against, was conflict instead of like, kind of like a, hey, welcome, let me help you, let me show you around. It was more like, oh, you're an E6. Well, better prove yourself, buddy.
Right.
So I don't know.
Huh. That's yeah. So you were technically in the process of getting your warfare pin, but it was unneeded for what you were doing.
Exactly.
Like that, the fact that you didn't have it was completely irrelevant to what you were doing that day and that month.
And that year, I mean, for years we were in the dry dock. So it really, and I begged my command. I was like, send me out to sea. I'll go get qualified out to sea. I'll go stand these watches. I'll go, send me on another ship to go and do these things if that's what's needed. And the command said, no. You need to be here. You need to be doing your nuclear job. You need to be doing that sort of thing. But also we need you to be qualified in submarines.
Yes, sir.
And I'm like, okay, great. I love military, like the rigorousness of the military. Like there's no logic applied. It's like, well, yeah, true.
Yeah.
That does make sense. But we also need you to do this ridiculous thing.
I just recently read Catch-22.
I still haven't read that.
It was kind of confusing to read, honestly. It was like, what is going, like, but just the concept, of having to do A, but you can't do A because B needs to happen.
Exactly.
And,
Yeah.
So is it easier to get a warfare pin at sea? Or is
It
it
is.
harder on shore?
It's a lot harder on shore for a number of reasons. One, and like the biggest and most glaring reason why it's harder is because at sea, no one has anywhere to go. They can't run up, like they can't run away. They can only hide from you for so long. They can only avoid you for so long, or you can find people underway a lot easier.
Right.
On shore,
you benefited from the ease of hiding.
I did. I certainly did. Yeah, it was easy for me to hide too.
Yeah.
And make excuses and all that stuff.
Yeah. Huh. Interesting.
But I eventually got it, I eventually did it, and, and it worked out, and I was proudly welcomed in, and I'm proud of it. I'm proud that I did it, that I earned that pin and kind of joined the group of people that have also earned that warfare pin. It was, I don't know, it's a meaningful thing for me.
Sure. Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's effort expended and it's acknowledgement and yeah. And then when you see other veterans, there's that common bond, I guess.
Well, and there's just not too many people that have been on a submarine. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no kidding.
It's just it's a unique experience, and it's different than being in a combat. I mean, I've never been in a combat zone. I've never had, armed enemy combatants like launching mortars. I got buddies who are, Army, and one of my good buddies was in the Marines and in Fallujah and like had mortars and shit launched at him.
Right.
And I didn't have to live with that sort of fear.
If something happened to you, you would never know it.
I would be dead, and chances are no one would ever know it. Right? Yeah. We would just sink, and that would be the end of all of us.
Yep.
Which I think on some levels can be comforting, but on other levels is truly terrifying.
Sure.
Right before I joined the Navy, there was a submarine. The Los Angeles, I believe.
Okay.
And it ran into an uncharted underwater mountain, going really, really, really fast, for a piece of equipment that big to be moving underwater. And a guy died when it slammed into this mountain. They were able to recover the submarine and drive it back in, but this poor guy, he was a nuclear machinist, mate, and he got hit by a toolbox and was killed.
Wow.
So that's not like getting hit by sniper fire or taking a building or whatever. This is a dude who takes logs and moves water from here to there,
right? And may have been just sitting on the can or something.
Boom. May have just been, and he gets killed, and that's the end of it. And then we also listened to this audio recording of this submarine sinking, and it's like a black box recording. And it's pretty powerful. It still sticks with me today. It's pretty powerful stuff. These people basically talking about their impending and instant death. And, they go, this submarine sank and it hit crush depth, and crush depth is what it sounds like. And it's where you're crushed. Like a can. It's crazy. But I don't know. That's like the sort of, when I see or know about other submariners, they're the only other people that kind of understand what type of environment that is. And there's certain people that can thrive in it, just like there's certain people like my Marine buddy who can kind of compartmentalize that fear and like kind of thrive in that sort of dangerous environment. And then there's people like me that's like, what for? What for? What are we doing here?
I'm not getting jollies off of this anymore.
Right.
I'm out.
What for, man? So I don't know. It's a challenge.
So it's kind of like, submariners are almost kind of like, if the military is kind of a clique-ish, not clique, but more like a camaraderie. Submariners, even a subset of that.
Subset of the subset.
Yeah. No pun intended.
Right. Exactly. Go ahead.
I would just say, did that like continue now that you're out? Even you see another submariner and it's like, oh yeah, hey dude, like there's that connection.
I think it is. I really do.
Yeah.
And especially because like, what I liked in part about the submarine force, or at least I didn't find this to be true ultimately when I got to the fleet, but this fable that I was taught was that the submarine force is different than the rest of the military in terms of like, the pomp and circumstance of being in the military, or the showmanship of it, the crisp, salutes and the rigid, pressed uniforms all the time and all this stuff. Because when you're underway on a submarine, like it's a pretty gray division between your seniors and your subordinates, right, if that makes sense. Because you're all living in it. You're all right there, and like the captain's eating basically at the same table as the crew, the rest of the crew. You're all eating the same stuff. You're all breathing the same air. You're all drinking the same water. You're all in it. And so it's a more, I guess I would say, as laid back as the military can be. It's laid back in terms of like uniform requirements and all that stuff underway. But then there's this performative aspect. When you return to shore, we have to put the face, we got to put our dancing shoes on,
right?
Put our face on. Hey, we're back on shore. We got to tighten up the screws and all this stuff. Another thing that it's just like, come on, why? Like, Navy SEALs aren't out there doing this stuff. We're the Navy SEAL equivalent,
right? Right.
At least the nuclear people that's what they tell us. I'm not making any claims. Don't come after me. I know some Navy SEALs. Like, I'm not trying to start a battle. I just say that's what they tell us. And it's like, hey man, if we're that badass, like, why don't we just tell everyone to shove it?
Right.
But the nuclear Navy was founded by this crazy ass Polak who was in the Navy for like 70 years. Dude was Hyman G. Rickover. He maybe not 70, but I think he was active duty for 50 years.
Oh, wow.
He fled Poland as a child, went to the Naval Academy, and then dude was an admiral, I think, for longer than he took to make admiral.
Wow.
It's kind of wild, man. But I don't know.
What? Yeah, wasn't for a while the nuclear navy was called Rickover's Navy, wasn't it?
I believe so.
To a certain extent.
Yeah.
Every nuclear applicant had to have an interview with him personally.
Yeah,
for a while,
and he would fuck with people too.
Really,
man. I love hearing old Rickover stories. Like he was, but it makes sense to me why he was like that in part. But also, it's like, dude, you're a lunatic. Like we let this is the example of the lunatics we let have power in the military. Like when I hear stories like this, these are the type of people that they give the keys to weapons, just so you know. They're a little bit cuckoo. But yeah, man, I always love hearing stories about old HG Rickover. I'll tell you one just real quick. My favorite. This is always So it wasn't every nuclear person, but it was all the nuclear officers. Because nuclear officers, when you start as a nuclear officer, you're basically on a track to be a commander of a submarine, right? One of Hyman G. Rickover's baby assets. He put a nuclear reactor on every submarine we have. So if you're going to be a commander of that, you have to, kind of pass the Rickover check. And so he needed submariners to run and operate these submarines. And so he would put them through these tests, and I really like it, because you think of, some of these officers maybe are coming from kind of upper crust societies where, they may not have had any interactions with blue collar people other than, maybe signing a check for mommy or daddy to pay the plumber or what. I don't know what they're doing. Right. But that might be their limitation. And now they're going to be not only living, but leading this group of people who are kind of we're a different group of people. We just have a different way of thinking about things. And so he would test them.
It's like a Yale graduate running a steel mill or something.
Exactly. Like you
different
want
cultures.
Yeah, you want some level of, test to make sure that this person can just handle themselves. And it is like all of his tests were to see if a person could think. And so actually, I told you I was going to tell you one, but I'm going to tell you two. The first one, and they're real quick. The first one that you always hear is that he had this chair, and it was like this, kind of like those stuffy chairs that you see in museums. They got wood, and then they're kind of tacked down with these puffy leather seats and backs, and they got the rivets down the sides and all that, and the two kind of arms. Well, he had this chair sitting in front of his desk, and he cut 2 inches off the front 2 legs, so it was tilted down. So he would have these young guys, right, in the academy. They're going to go be nuclear officers. He has them come in for an interview with Admiral Rickover, which, for anyone talking to an admiral, that's kind of like
you're sweating.
That's a scary thing to do anyway. And then he's going to put you in a chair where you're slanted down. So these guys are trying to sit in this chair and act, officerly in front of this admiral, and they keep sliding out onto the floor. And he's grilling them. He's like this tiny little, scary, like Skeletor looking guy, and he's just grilling them, and they can't stay seated in this chair. So he messes them with him that way. So that's kind of like a general story. And then one time, this guy comes in, and he probably had an air about him, or, Rickover knew who he was or whatever. But he tells this guy, he says, "Go stand in my closet." And this guy listened to the admiral and went and stood in Rickover's closet. And Rickover just left him there for like 8 hours. I mean, all day. This guy didn't think to come out. So the guy finally, I don't even remember what happens, but ultimately that guy did not make the cut to be a submarine officer. Simply because that's a really dumb thing to do, right? To stay in a closet all day, because an admiral told you to. Like, that's why. What benefit is that? And Rickover was like, I don't want an idiot like that who just follows orders to drive my $1 billion war machine. Like,
interesting.
You know, I want someone that's going to be like, I like your idea, sir, but let me provide you with maybe a different option that's more you know, I mean, just like,
sure.
Anyway, so that's the dude who kind of built this nuclear program, and like laid the foundation for this very rigorous, self-contained, self-regulated program. I mean, they let 20-year-old men operate nuclear reactors.
Yeah.
And where else in the world are you going to do that? Like, nowhere. Right? That's insane. But because of how this program was built and how he kind of laid these foundations for the rigorousness and the mentality of the personnel, it allows it to be operated, you know, I mean, relatively safely, other than the loss of the thresher. And a couple, you know, I think there's been some low-level discharge incidents of contaminated water, but I mean, like, really benign type of stuff that of course gets inflated by the media, but largely accident-free. You think about 3 Mile Island, that was a civilian-run, you know, nuclear power plant. They screwed the pooch on that one. Chernobyl screwed the pooch on that one, right? Blew all that stuff up. The tsunami, like Fukushima, the Fukushima nuclear reactor in 2011. I mean, come on, what are you going to do? Maybe don't build a reactor on a nuclear or on a fault line, but really wasn't much anyone could do about that nuclear accident. But the point is, you know, the nuclear Navy hasn't really had an accident like that, a big reactor meltdown. And we have, you know, Joe Blow, he might be driving your stinking garbage truck or packaging your fries at McDonald's, like, who operated. I know these dudes. They've operated nuclear reactors. They're genius. They're smart people, you know. But they don't have the pedigree, I guess.
Huh. I hadn't thought of it that way before.
Yeah.
So so you went through all that, everything, military, Navy, etc. How did that, the rank structure, everything you were talking about, how did that affect your outlook on life? Your approach to, especially now that you're out, your approach to civilian life.
Yeah.
How did that affect you outside of the military, I guess?
That's a good question. And it's something that I'm still wrestling, still coming to terms with. If I was a senior in 2001, I was a sophomore, but if I was a senior in 2001, I would have joined the Army right then and gone overseas to you know, kill people in the Middle East.
Sure.
Right, with a gun. But I wasn't, so there was like this cooling off period, and I didn't join the military right after 9/11. But I still had like a very idealistic vision, and I still do in parts of what this country is and what it means to me, and you know, I to this day I feel like I have bought and earned my right to say I'm a patriot in the face of people who are doing some pretty despicable things to the, you know, to like the idea of this country. So, you know, I'm rambling trying to answer your question, but I struggle with it. And
it's a philosophical one for sure. So
like, you know, I'm idealistic and I love the Constitution. I think it's a great living document that deserves, you know, to be fixed, and it deserves to be updated, and it deserves to be improved upon, because at the foundation, the ideas behind it could prove to be very useful for people of all types. And, you know, right now where we're at politically in this landscape is that there are people that exist out there that are starting to think that the American flag is, or displaying the American flag is hate speech, and they're afraid of people who are proud of the American flag and people who are proud of the Constitution and people who say they're patriots and all that stuff, simply because of some pretty ignorant shit that people are doing. And the country's not perfect, and the government is not perfect. And I am a small government kind of guy. And if one thing really I took away and really solidified my outlook on life in the military was the idea that we need a smaller government. Like we are a diverse group of people who live in 50 unique states and a couple U.S. territories that should probably be recognized and given the benefits of states. But all of like that diversity, as we continue to grow and like continue to populate this country, we can't have this big monolithic government making a homogenous, white coat of paint for everyone. That's just not how it works. We've had people who have benefited from systemic injustice and people who have really suffered at the hands of systemic injustice and people who don't even know what systemic injustice means. So they don't think it's real. But it made me kind of bitter, kind of jaded, like this world that we live in, and like this indoctrination that happens, at least where I grew up in small town America, right? Small town, middle America, middle of Wyoming. There's just not a lot going on. There's no cities,
right,
It's like, you got God and country to really fall back on, and the Colorado Rockies and the Denver Broncos.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like having this idealistic vision of the good of the, what the military is as this, as this enforcing arm of the government of the United States of America, seeing how it actually works and what actually that idealistic vision is, it was really disappointing to me because it turns out that it's just a bunch of people, a bunch of humans doing human shit, and humans are not ideal.
Right.
We make mistakes and we're greedy and we are power hungry and we're self-centered. And, a place like the government or a place like the military is a real vehicle for people to be selfish and self-centered and to kind of, do things in a way that really impact other people's lives before they realize that they're impacting other people's lives in a negative way. The military is a breeding ground for arrested development. Not the show, but a state of not progressing or not maturing. And so you have people who, stay in the military until 20 years retirement, and they get out and, they're 38, retired from the military, and they basically haven't matured much past 18 when they went in. And that's, not everyone's like that. You can't make generalizing statements because everyone's different, but I would say, I came to this conclusion more often than I didn't, that the people that are in the military, it's like, it's like high school 2.0. And it's like, dude, we're adults here, we're professionals.
Right.
Can we elevate ourselves past this? And, I'm sure command by command, just like franchise by franchise anywhere else, you're going to have the good ones and you're going to have the bad ones. So maybe I just got in on some bad tracks. And when I say bad, I don't mean like it was awful,
maybe
but I mean like, people my age right now were senior leadership when I was 21, 22, 23. in that, in those positions. And like, guess what? I don't know my ass from a hole in the ground. And neither did they.
Right.
But they had to pretend that they did. They had to, they had to instill that confidence, or at least they thought that they couldn't be humble. So like that sort of stuff, that masking, that performative aspect just is in the hands of someone who doesn't know what they're doing, can create an environment that is just, it's really not great to be in. It's really not great to thrive in, and all of that stuff. And, I felt a lot of pressure points while I was in, and, I came out with just this, I went in with this thing that we're good and we're doing good. And, I took this oath to defend freedom and democracy around the world. And I said it every day in boot camp. And, that's what we do in the Navy, defend freedom and democracy around the world. Well, I got educated and I realized that defending freedom and democracy around the world means interventionist policies in countries that don't want our presence. That maybe a rich person in that country wants our presence, but the rest of the people, they don't, because they're getting exploited, right? And when the military is used as a vehicle to further capitalism, and to, well, not when, but to learn that the military is used as a vehicle to further capitalism, that's a tough pill for an idealist to swallow, to realize that's how the world works, my friend. That's how the butter gets bread.
Spread.
you got what I was saying. The bread gets buttered.
No. I don't want that mental picture.
But does that make philosophical rambling near complete? But like,
sure. I mean, you went in with this idea of what your experience was going to be.
Yeah.
And you saw that while physically and it worked. I mean, you had, like you say, you had 20-year-olds running reactors, but what it was pointed at was not what you had anticipated.
Exactly.
Kind of the what's the Jurassic Park quote? Your scientists were so busy figuring out if they could, they never thought if they should.
Yeah, never stopped to think that they should. Yeah. But it's also, dude, it's complex. How I feel about the military, especially what I did, is super complex, because I also feel like, and maybe this is self-justification, but the job that I had and the field that I served in, the ballistics missile, nuclear submarines, was the most constitutionally rigorous arm of the military that we have. And the reason that I thought that was because it enables us to defend our country against enemies, foreign and domestic. Really more foreign. We're not going to drop a nuke on our soil, but it is it's a non-interventionist deterrent. It's a strategic deterrent. Okay. So bad guys know that we have the capability to literally eliminate who they are and their cousins and family and everyone they've ever known from history completely. I mean, just get rid of it.
Right.
In a blink. Our enemies know this, and so they don't do things that actually could lead to those consequences, right? There's blustering, there's all sorts of this political showmanship and whatever, but they work. Our strategic deterrents work. No one wants to get in a nuclear war because it will literally disrupt every aspect of everyone's life everywhere. It doesn't matter if you're Vladimir Putin or Kim Jong-il or, whoever.
Right.
Like,
sure.
No one wants a nuclear war. And the sooner I think we can all realize that, the better off we're going to be in terms of telling our representatives, kind of what to do and what not to do with our military. So I think it's, I think it's good, and I think it's necessary, and I think there's a purpose for it. I think it could be improved a lot to make sure that, people aren't getting harmed, mentally, physically, all of that stuff to make sure it's done the right way. But in terms of, would I rather send my friend who's a Marine, 9,000 miles away
Sure.
to get shot at in a sand and mud structure? Or would I rather have a bunch of guys drive around on a submarine? I would pick the submarine hands down. I mean,
Sure.
It's really not hard for anyone to look around and see what damage warfare overseas does back home. Let's look at our population of homeless veterans or drug addicted veterans or veterans with PTSD. Like, if you don't think the echoes of that are felt in the wives and the children and the family members, and like, as that impact ripples out, it's not just damaging that person, it's damaging every person that damaged person comes into contact with. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it's, it's hard. Like, it's all sorts of complex emotions. I feel great about it. I don't feel great about it. I don't know. I hope one day, maybe when I'm old and gray, I'll have it all put together. But for right now, man, it's just, I keep plugging away, keep trying to understand what it all means.
A fellow Pat Watson, he has a quote that is kind of a sea change. Pat Watson says, proximity to command equals attention from command.
Mm-hmm.
And was that your experience? What, both in the positive and negative, what would you say to that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the leaders, the officers and the senior enlisted folks and the chain of command, if you're seen by them, that could be a good thing or a bad thing. And I'll start with this side of it. I'll start with the bad thing. We would get jealous of people who were not great sailors. And I really wrestle with the things that I said to these people. We call them shitbags, and really be mean to them because they wouldn't or couldn't perform at a level that everyone
maybe didn't
else
get their warfare pin or something.
Exactly. I passed that love on for sure. But they like, oh shit, I lost my train of thought.
Proximity to command.
Oh yeah,
etc.
Yeah. So the saying goes, hookups for fuck ups, or hoofu. And if you're, if you're getting noticed by command for messing up routinely, you can't be fired, right? You're a member of the military,
right.
If you're just not doing a good job, but you're not being malicious about it, you're not, intentionally shirking your duties or anything, you're just not good. Or they can't prove that you're not, doing this other stuff.
Sure.
You get some great gig where, maybe you don't have to go to sea, or maybe you don't have to stand a certain watch, or maybe you don't have to do these things because you're incapable of doing them.
Right. But you're part of the club, so you have to be on the boat.
On the boat, but someone else has to cover for you.
Oh, interesting.
And then proximity to command. So the engine room, it's funny you mentioned that. The engine room is in the back of the submarine, and it's called the helm, and the planes and the con, where the boat is driven from and commanded from, is up front. So, it's kind of petty and it's kind of silly, but up front people, we call them forward guys, forward area guys. They were always getting awards for doing shit because that's where the captain is. He's walking around, he's watching people, even the senior enlisted people, they're up in the forward compartment watching these guys, put the spit shine on a fire hose valve, or whatever they're doing up there.
Right.
The cooks are making a dinner that's tasty, and they'll get an award and whatever. And we would always be grumbling. We're in the back, literally making the boat go through the water so that we don't die.
Right.
And no one's giving us an award, because you're not seen by command. So it's kind of tough being a worker in that environment, because you only get praised by your leadership. And if your leadership sucks, it's a thankless job, and it's not a fun job, and it can suck. So yeah, proximity to command definitely equals attention from command, for sure.
So I know a lot of people in the military hate this question, but what is your? I'll phrase it this way: what's your favorite submarine movie?
My favorite submarine movie, Down Periscope.
Okay.
Prepare to dive!
That's yeah. There's your dumb civilian question.
Yeah. No, there's some accurate ones, Hunt for Red October, I think. I don't know. I don't watch it. I would watch those. I watched them when I was a kid, but now after doing it, I'm like, I don't even.
Yeah.
Watch that stuff. But I do remember the Hunt for Red October is fairly accurate in terms of being a submariner and what life is like on a submarine, at least for forward area guys.
Sure.
The engine room, the nukes.
Yeah.
We're like the dirt people, the overpaid dirt people. So yeah.
Yeah. Huh. What when you're around civilians, because obviously a lot of people listening to this are civilians, or the majority of them, I would assume. What bugs you the most about the way civilians treat the military? Or what? Or let's look at it two ways. What do you appreciate the most, and what bugs you the most?
It's the same answer.
Okay.
When people thank me for my service.
Okay.
It's like, the reason we did that is because the Vietnam War was not popular, and the unpopularity of that was directed at the people who were drafted to go and do that stuff, right?
Yeah.
They were drafted. They didn't have a choice, right? So they weren't treated very well. And I mean, I'm talking about my father's generation of people. An entire generation of military members were treated like pieces of shit and like awful humans. And they had to do awful things or be thrown in jail or die.
Right.
Like that's your choice. So what are you going to do, man? So then that generation, came into power or whatever. Our baby boomers kind of took over, and they're like, we're not going to stand for this, because now we have started a war for our benefit. And we're going to send people over there to die.
And you're going to be grateful.
So we're going to have to be very grateful for them defending and protecting our freedom, because people who ride camels can certainly invade the shores of fucking Virginia or whatever. So, people do it like, and it's, did you, oh no, when people do it, it just seems to me like that's what the Nazis would do. Like, you're doing what the Nazi party would do. Like they'd go, the people were in fear of the SS, and they're like, oh, Heil Hitler or whatever. So that they wouldn't be killed. And I'm not trying to conflate this and make it equivalent. But what I'm saying is that when it's obligatory, which it is, people feel obligated to thank a veteran because of our sacrifice for the country. I did sacrifice something, and I was happy to do it. I was happy to take the oath to put my life on the line to defend this ideal that I feel is important, and it is important to me. So at one point I was willing to, and proved that I was willing to put my life on the line. So when someone honestly and truly thanks me for doing that, it's meaningful.
Sure.
But that's not,
you feel what's behind it.
that's not how people are doing it. Like I'm at the pot shop buying pot with my military. I'm getting a 10% military discount. Right. Like, you don't need
now that you're out, you can use your discount.
Exactly. Like, you don't need to thank me for my service, man. This is my reward. Like, this is, right. my discount's reward enough. Thank you. I feel very very great. I'm going to take it every time. I'm going to take that veteran's discount every time I can get it. But, do I feel like the entire country needs to bow down to every veteran? No, I knew some scumbags, man. I served with some scummy people. And if the thought of them getting thanked for their service, it kind of makes me upset a little bit. So does that answer your questions? Yeah, it does. Yeah. It cheapens it a little bit. But it also feels good. Thanks. Thank you for recognizing that I did do something that other people don't do. And if we didn't do it, what would happen? Would there be a draft? If people didn't volunteer, you better believe that the U.S. government is going to draft you to go fight in its capitalist wars overseas. That's absolutely what's going to happen. So a volunteer force of people prevents having a draft. No matter how many regulations we put in place or whatever, it would happen. I'm convinced. So, so when people sincerely thank me or whatever, and I know it's what the reason is for, it's meaningful.
Right.
But as a greeting, as now this is a thing that I say because I know you were in the military. You don't know what I did.
Right.
I could have murdered a bunch of people and then just gotten out of, Fort Leavenworth.
Sure.
You don't just arbitrate. You have no idea the type of person that I am, and you're just going to blanket thank me. That's not what it should be for, man. So I don't know. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. No, that's because that is a real common, like you say, it's just assumed as a civilian's response to military is kind of like tipping, it's right. Assumed.
Yeah.
Not that intrinsically makes it bad, but that's definitely the assumption.
Yeah.
There. So, what would a standard day on the boat be like when you're out on a cruise? What's your day to day?
I hope. Whatever. NCIS might come and arrest me if I divulge too much
very
information.
Generally, obviously, yeah.
But, we work a different shift underway. We're essentially on an 18-hour a day schedule on a 24-hour clock. So what that means is you're awake for 12 and asleep for 6. Each 24-hour period. So you have, we all stand watches underway. Okay. Every person on the boat stands at least one 6-hour watch in a 24-hour period. Sometimes it's more. And this is on submarines. There are aircraft carriers do different watch rotations and all that because they have more people and all that stuff. But on a submarine, this is kind of how it goes. So you stand your 6-hour watch, wherever that's at, taking logs, monitoring, operating, this sort of stuff. And then that's your on watch time. And then you have your off going watch time. And when you're off going watch, meaning you've just been relieved, you usually get relieved and you go eat. That's one of the good things about being on a submarine is there's 4 meals and you can always eat. It's not always lobster and whatever, there's all these historical sayings about what the food was like on board submarines, and it's literally from World War II. None of that stuff is real today, folks. Let's update our knowledge. So you'd get off watch and you'd go eat. Well, then on your off going time, then you would either have to come back and do maintenance, or you would have to come back and do drills, either participate in drills or help them run drills. So we were always, you gotta practice like you play. You gotta stay ready. We were running drills for every like all sorts of casualties,
Sure,
all the time.
Sure.
Which is okay. It helps pass the time, idle hands are the devil's something plaything or whatever.
Sure.
So they like to keep us occupied so that we don't get into trouble. And then once you're done with that off-going period, then you have your oncoming watch time. And your oncoming watch time is your 6 hours of sleep. And you get to go and you get to be in your rack and sleep for 6 hours, and then you wake up and you start the cycle all over again. So it's oncoming, on watch, and off going are your three basic states of living. If you're in the rack or sleeping during your oncoming time and they have drills, you have to participate in the drills. So there's times when you don't actually get to utilize your sleep time because you're fighting a casualty. You practice like you play. If they're doing a fire drill, guess what? Everyone on board that submarine needs to participate, because if there's an actual fire, we're going to die. Or God, there even is, if there's a real fire. We've had a couple real fires underway, and it's nice that you've practiced, because you can put them out real quick.
Sure.
And if you can put them out real quick, then you can go back to bed and kind of get back to normal and all that stuff. And no one dies, right? You have fires are the worst thing to have on board a submarine. Very scary, very rapid response on that. But, and then that just repeats like Groundhog Day until you're done. And I was underwater for 50 days. And I was getting a qualification, and up in the front of the boat, there's this room called the officer's study. And it's this little room, and they have a TV up, and it's where the officers can go and read their procedures and kind of do what officers do. But they have this TV in there, and the TV is connected to our periscope. So you can see what the periscope's seeing. And we happened to just be transiting, not quite on the surface, but enough so that the kind of the back of the boat was sticking out of the water, and then of course the conning tower and the periscope were up.
Okay.
And it was facing aft over the tail of the boat, and I walked into that study, and that was on the TV, and man, I sat there and just wide-eyed for 10 minutes. I've never seen anything. Obviously I had seen it before every day for my entire life, but it was just this big open ocean and this baby blue sky and one or two kind of seagulls, no land in sight, but just these birds kind of following the path of the ship. And it was wild, man. It was wild. It was one of those powerful memories that I hadn't seen the sky in nearly 2 months. And I didn't breathe fresh air during that time period either. It's all recycled air. We do ventilate from time to time. I don't want to make it seem like it's that bad, but really to be outside and take a big, full, deep breath of air, that didn't happen until we were back in, and my deployment wasn't even the longest that people go on. People go on, on those ballistics missile subs, they can stay out for 90 days. Some I know dudes that were out for 94 days.
Wow.
Without coming back in, without stopping. So,
wow.
It's crazy, man. It's crazy.
Huh.
I don't even remember what question you asked me to start that off, but
me neither.
You'll get it in post.
Yeah, I'll fix it in post. What's a group? The Traveling Wilburys musical group.
Why do I know that? Yeah,
it's like a super group, but
yeah.
But their name came from the phrase when they were recording. They'd say, "Oh, we'll bury it in post."
Oh, Wilburys.
So,
yeah, okay.
So, Yeah, I hadn't thought of just being underwater, like not seeing the sky. Yeah, that must have been when you come into port, you're prepared, you're expecting it. You're like, hey, we're coming home, gonna see the family, see the outdoors.
Yep.
But you just walk in a room and be like, this isn't a movie. This is literally 20, 30, 100 feet above me or whatever.
Yep.
Whatever the height is. Yeah. So, that's crazy.
Yeah.
So assuming, this is a big ask, but assuming a kid made it this far through the episode. And
well, let me just give you a hand, friend.
Thank
you don't
you
have
for
anything
your
going
service, kid.
Yeah.
If they're interested in the military, they're like, hey, I want to join the military. This is what I want to do. What advice would you give them, having been there?
Yeah. I needed the military when I needed it. And that's just so tough for me to realize because it did a lot of damage to me and who I am as a person. But it did a lot of good for me. You know, there was a lot of good in it. The structure, you know, having a kind of a purpose within a larger group of people. I never thought that I was part of this, you know, that I meant shit to the big Navy, but I meant something to the people that I was around, and I had this visible impact. So in terms of self-worth and daily purpose, I had that, but it was a struggle, man. I struggled with depression and all that stuff, and I take medication for it now. I couldn't take it, when you're a nuclear submarine qualified, you can't take depression medicine, you know, because it'll alter your behavior. I don't know what the reasoning is, but it was pretty awful to live with that and be treated a certain way and have to do these certain things in kind of a constrained environment. So I would say to young Mitch, I hope you know what you're doing, man. You know, have you looked at tech schools? Have you looked at college? Why not either of those things? You know, are you going to use the military to pay for college? If that's what it is, then go and do the absolute minimum amount of time to get that GI Bill, and then take that GI Bill and go to a tech school. Don't go to college. Everyone has a college degree and they don't mean shit anymore. Go to a tech school, learn how to make some money and use that. Use the government to benefit yourself. There's no ideal in it anymore, my friends. You know, it's about setting yourself up for success. And if you look at it as a corporate job, you're entering a corporate world that they're going to provide you paid training. And you can swallow your pride and, and suck it up for a period of time. It'll do good, and you can reap some benefits from it. There's a lot of benefits that you can reap from being a veteran. However, you risk putting your life. You're signing to put your life on the line for an old ass document made by rich white people who own slaves. And then edited by more racist rich white people over the next couple hundred years. So I don't know. It's a choice everyone's got to make. And I'm a big believer in fate. And I wouldn't be where I'm at if I didn't walk down that path. But sometimes I do wonder where my mental health would be at if I didn't walk down that path, what my life would look like right now if I didn't walk down that path.
Sure.
You know, I'm a pretty motivated, pretty hardworking guy, and being hardworking and being honest and being reliable will get you far in any avenue in life. But if you're a scumbag and you want to skate by, join the military, man. It's a great place to do that. I'm not even kidding. You got to pass physical standards and all that stuff, but if you can do that, you can skate for 20 years. I know guys skated for 20 years. They get a retirement out of it. You know, they get a big fat retirement check and they get out at 38. I mean, 38, God, you can start 2 or 3 new careers.
Right.
When you're 38 years old. And so, yeah, congratulations, guy who made it this far. I hope that tidbit of information was worth something.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, you can't unring that bell, but you wonder what it would have been like if you hadn't.
Yeah. Exactly. But I'm a better person for it, I think. I really do. And I've learned a lot about who I am and where I stand, and it really, if nothing else, I bought my ticket to call myself a proud patriot in a way that I know is honorable and good, and it's not from a hateful, racist, bigoted place.
Mm-hmm.
It's from a place that I care enough about this country that we're afforded more freedoms and liberties than a lot of other places on the planet. My patriotism means that I'm here to make it better. Like, I'm here. I own it. I am a part of it. And, I will always use my power, my power to vote, to try to make it better for everyone who lives here. And that's my job as a patriot, because that's why I love this diverse country that welcomes immigrants. And, like, some of these things that you hear hateful people railing against are wrong, man.
Mm-hmm.
They're wrong. Those hateful people are wrong about a lot of things. And this patriot right here, is here to say being a patriot is not being a racist, and it's not kicking people out of the country, and it's not putting exclusions and this, that, or the other, being a protectionist or whatever. That's not what being a patriot is. Being a patriot is loving your country for all that it is and making it better for everyone who lives here. And that's my work now. That's what I want to do with the rest of my life, is kind of pass that message of patriotism along to anyone. And it doesn't matter if you've served in the military or you haven't served in the military. That's what a patriot is. A patriot wants to make it better and not worse. We can't go back in time because guess what? People were shitty back in time. Right? They did some shitty things, and we're trying to grow past those things, and we can, and we will, and we have in the past. But we can't grow if we keep looking backwards and saying, God, it was real good back then. Because guess what? It wasn't. It wasn't real good. It was real good for you, Whitey, but it wasn't good for anyone who had brown skin. It wasn't good for anyone who was gay. It wasn't good for anyone who immigrated to this country at the request of this country. But it was good for the white man, not good for the Native Americans, but it was good for the white man. And we need to fix that. That's what my future wants to be. That's what I want to see as the future of my country, that this country that I fought, fought in quotes, enlisted to defend. I still hold that oath to defend the Constitution of the United States, and everyone who's against it. I defend that, and that doesn't. For me, that's not rooted in hate. We can grow past that. We can edit that stuff out. We can acknowledge it first of all, and we can change it.
Sure.
And we can make it better. We can make it better for a lot of different people in a lot of different ways. We're a very resourceful country, and we have a lot of wealth, and we can make it better for a lot of different people if we didn't use our wealth to make rich white people richer white people.
Richer, whiter people.
Richer, whiter people.
When I think of something, I need to write it down because I just forgot. It may come to me.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's. Oh, yes. I've been realizing that it's easy, just irregardless of whatever. If you look back at history, it's easy to have our own mental image of what it was like back then.
Mm-hmm.
And it is easy to look back and say, oh, the good old days,
Mm-hmm.
Whether it was your grandparents or your, Columbus or whatever.
Yeah.
Whatever time frame. But it's very likely that if we look that our grandchildren or great-grandchildren we'll look back and say, oh, wow, the good old days. And if we were there, we'd be like, no, you have no idea. Like, there was this and that. It was difficult.
Yep.
But the fog of history, I guess, makes it, it's easy to remove, what am I trying to say? By glorifying the good old days, it removes our responsibility in our own time.
Yep.
You know, because, well, they had it easier back then.
Yeah.
So that's why life was good.
Right.
Whereas, you know, so that's why things aren't easy now.
Yep.
It has nothing to do with my personal effort, which I think is not correct. I think whatever situation you're in, to avoid personal responsibility is a bad way to go at best. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, I think of the good old days. I'm like, oh yeah, you know,
we
the
all
good old
do.
days, and
we're taught to think that way, man. That's just that's our culture. It's in movies, it's in TV, it's in the documentaries that we watch. Like, we're very fond of nostalgia, and we don't want to think ill of the dead or of the past, or, like, I don't know, these hangovers from bygone eras. But I don't want my children's children to look back at 2021 and say, man, those were the good old days. I want them to look back and say, it is way better now. They set us up for success. And unfortunately, the generation before us didn't set us up for success in a lot of ways. In a lot of ways, sure, they did. Paving the way for technology and advancement and making these laws that allow us to see our cultural mistakes and our oppression of certain people. In that way, they have advanced us. But, you know, we got to do better. And I know this is a talk about military and veterans, but dude, I mean, this is what I paid for. You know, this is what I signed up and did my 8.5 for. Was so that I can tell people this stuff. And, you know, I want my kids to look back and say, yeah, they were at the foundation of making this place exactly what it was intended to be, which is awesome and great and powerful and welcoming and protective and giving and, you know, all of this stuff that, like, you read the Constitution, like, or I read the Constitution, I get filled, like, with this, like, power. Like, it's this document that has always been, you know, just so powerful to me, and it's good, and it lives, it's alive, we're taught that from the beginning, that it's a living document. And that means that you can change it to make it so that every single person, right? What's written on the Statue of Liberty? You know, you're tired, you're weak, you're poor, right? Not your people that we choose. You know, not your people that fit the criteria, right? It's all of these people. You know, it's a good place to live, and we benefit from it at all levels. So I don't even know what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. Well, yeah, to pop back to kind of the military. I mean, I'm not knocking that. That's definitely that's good. But I was gonna say to circle back to the military, but I won't. What with the possible exception of the moment going into the officer study and seeing the image, when you look back on your 8.5 in the military, what moment is the most memorable for you? What's like the
playing rugby for the Navy?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For 2 weeks, I got to be a professional athlete, which was always a dream of mine. And I got to go and I got to represent the Navy at a rugby tournament. And, you know, we represented them well. It was a lot of fun. It got me away from the place I was at that was really tough for me. I was really struggling, and it kind of gave me a reprieve from that. Unfortunately, it wasn't enough to make me want to go like, yeah, I'm going to stick this thing out for the rest of my life.
Right.
But it was just one of those special things that, I don't know. I don't really know too many other professional athletes personally, and not like I'm not trying to say that I'm better than I was, but for that 2-week time period, I was paid to play sports. I was paid to play rugby. I made a salary and I made a stipend, and that was my job, man, and it was awesome. And if I could do that, the entire time, I would have in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
But if you want to know maybe more of like a military type thing, the first time I saw my submarine, I got on, I got out to the command out here, and they flew me out to Hawaii to meet my boat. They were going to come in, do what's called a BSP, which is a brief stop for personnel. And this is kind of actually a pretty memorable experience. I'll tell you about it. So it's called a brief stop for personnel. So I flew down, and this will be quick. I flew down to Hawaii with this other guy who actually we call it UA in the Navy. They call it AWOL in other branches. But he fled to Canada. This dude. And I met, it was really crazy.
Before you were with him or after? He ended up?
After. Okay. We were on the same boat together. We flew out. We had the exact same birthday, separated by a few years. It was just very, very interesting, like kind of the circumstances. We showed up to the boat, or we go down to Hawaii. We stay the night. I'm super nervous. It's my first time being on a ship. So I was in Hawaii for my first time in my life. And I was in bed at 5 p.m. The sun was still up. I didn't know what to do, man. So I'm laying at attention, ready to show up to my first command. I was so spun up.
You spent 3.5, 4 years getting ready for this moment.
Basically, through training and all of that stuff. Yeah, and I'm just super nervous. Well, we get on this boat in the morning, and they load on food, and it's just, it's a metal hulled boat. Mm-hmm. And we go out to kind of this protected harbor area, and in comes this submarine, and it's driving on the surface, and it's enormous. It is enormous and kind of terrifying. Because what you can see above the water is only part, and then there's the whole ship below it. And it is, dude, it's huge. It's unbelievably, I can't even, it's enormous. You have no idea. People think that submarines are small and cramped, and no, it's big. It's bigger than you would could ever even imagine.
Yeah.
And I saw that thing pull in, and, I mean, just it was amazing to me from minute one, and I was always able to put it out of my head that this is a machine meant for war and death and massive destruction, ultimately. But so the boat I was on kind of pulled up next to the submarine, and we're kind of driving through the water next to each other, and they throw over a gangplank or whatever, and off comes this officer, and I'm new out to the fleet. I don't know what they do with saluting or how that works, or all of the rules of being on board a boat, and so this officer comes off and looks at me, and I don't salute him, and he gets pissed. He doesn't say anything to me because it turns out he was kind of a disgraced officer, and he had been fired from his position and was getting kicked off the boat. And so I didn't salute him. So it was probably throwing salt in this poor guy's wound. But he had me pull off his life jacket or whatever. But I would say that's one of them. The seeing the back of the boat in the officer's study was another one, and then probably playing rugby would be three of my top most memorable times in the Navy.
Yeah. Huh. So what about the dude that went UA? What's the story there?
I talked. Who did I talk to? I talked with a guy who had ended up talking to him, and he like almost kind of apologized to my other friend, who had talked to him, and my friend was like, I don't care. Like, this doesn't affect me at all. I don't care about you anymore. As soon as you left my site, I forgot about you as a person.
Sure.
Like, it doesn't matter. Like, but I think he was forgiven, or, like, he didn't serve any jail time.
Really?
I think he may still be in Canada.
Interesting.
I don't know. He's one of those guys that it's like, I'm kind of upset with, but at the same time, I'm kind of envious of, like, the sack on that guy to just up and like leave the military.
Right.
Holy cow, dude! They got documents and records on us stretching from way back to before we were born, basically.
Right.
So it's kind of scary to run afoul of the government. But hey, any of you guys that join, just know, flee to Canada. They're not going to look for you, probably.
But yeah, then there's also that, you were on the team, man. You ditched me.
Exactly.
Kind of.
So that's
the conflict there.
And being on a submarine is it's really a small team environment. So a loss of one person affects the team. That means more watches that people have to stand, or a worse watch rotation, or whatever. When you're fully staffed up, you can move into, there can be times where you don't have to be on watch every 18 hours, right? You can sometimes take a 12-hour break and sleep, or catch up on some rest if you have enough people in your division. But if one person leaves, like, let's say they get pregnant, guess what? The Navy doesn't have a backup for that pregnant person waiting in the wings. That's a billet that has to get filled on a specific rotation. So
that's why you chose to never get pregnant.
That's why I always use birth control, personally. I have not been pregnant once, which is good, because I'm not going to let the team down.
Oh, well, cool. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
Got anything to plug?
Oh, yeah, thank you. Anyone who's listening, if you're interested in hearing more of me and my comedic genius, myself and two other friends of mine, non-military, we have a podcast called Boys with a Z. It's available on Anchor, Spotify, I don't know, wherever you get podcasts. Go look it up. Boys, B-O-Y-S, with a Z, the letter Z.
How do you spell A?
A is spelled. Just look at the front of the alphabet.
Cool.
But yeah, man. Thanks. Yeah. Oh, thanks, Walt. Sorry, bud. Thanks, Walt. Hopefully you can get that in post. This was a lot of fun.
Thank you for listening to this episode of How I Embraced the Suck. If you enjoyed the show, tell a friend. And as my Girl Scout den mother used to say, stay frosty.
Cool. I know I rambled a bit, but hopefully you got something you can use.